In February 1933, when Frank Tomasello heard that the federal government was repealing the 21st Amendment and ending prohibition, he didn't waste any time. He jumped into his truck and drove through a snowstorm to Washington, D.C. to be one of the first in line for a winery license. And with license number 68 for the entire country, Tomasello Winery was founded. Welcome to part 1 in this series with Jack Tomasello.
My grandfather, who was a farmer, he was a first generation American. My great-grandparents arrived here from Sicily somewhere in the mid-1800s, and my grandfather was born in the United States in 1884. And so they grew up as farmers. They were farmers here. In Hammonton, you're either a farmer or a tailor. And when they immigrated here from Italy, both things were definitely needed, agriculture or tailors. And Hammonton went on to have many shops to places to go to have suits and dresses made. Matter of fact, Hammonton Park was one of the top suits companies that made men's suits in the United States up until around 1978, 79. And so either you were a tailor or a farmer. My family, they were farmers. And so my grandfather in 1933, he and his wife, right after the 21st Amendment was passed, my grandmother, Annie Tomasello, decided to go into wine business. Like most Italian Americans and Sicilian Americans, they made homemade wine. Everybody here in Hammonton, a lot of people made homemade wine. And during Prohibition, you were still allowed to make homemade wine. You just couldn't sell it or buy it, but you could make it. And so he made pretty good wine. And around, I guess, the end of Prohibition in 1933, he decided he wanted to get a winery license. So he drove in February of 33, went to Washington, D.C., and got the 68th bonded winery license. Now, 68 is a very low number in comparison to today, where there's over 10,000 wineries in the United States. All 50 states have wineries. So he became, Tomasello Winery became a corporation, and he was the 68th, he had the 68th license in the United States. From that, what he grew, and his family had 5 children. His oldest son and his youngest son followed his footsteps into the business. He had 5 children. They had my grandmother and my grandfather, and my dad was the youngest, and my uncle was the oldest, and there were 3 girls in the middle. They were 14 years apart, my uncle and my father, but my uncle went into the business, and then my father followed around 1940. In 41, my uncle went into the service, Second World War, and my dad, they always kept one kid. If you were in agriculture, they kept one son to farm. And during the Second World War, part of our vineyard actually was used for sweet potatoes or potatoes, because they needed people to farm, because most of the men were overseas at the time. So my dad stayed behind, and he was a potato farmer for those few years during the Second World War. My uncle came back in 45, and they were the second generation in the business. In 1971, my uncle passed away at a very young age. He was only 61. And my dad ran the business by himself for 10 years. And I joined the company around 1981, and my brother joined in 1983. And we became the 3rd generation in the family. And we have run it ever since. And my oldest child, my son Sean, he's now in the business. and my brother's only child, his son is in the business, so they make up the fourth generation. So the business is 89 years old as of now. We're the four generations deep, family-owned business. We're the largest production winery in the state of New Jersey. We actually make up 1/3 of the production of the wine made in New Jersey. And we export overseas. We also sell in about 35 states. Our markets overseas are in Japan and China. And we also do some custom work for some other wineries out of state. And we grow 68 acres of vineyard. We also purchase grapes that are grown locally here in southern New Jersey. We have 2 or 3 independent growers to grow for us. We make a large selection of wines. We make dry wines, varietals such as Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot and Chardonnay. We also make some semi-sweets, some semi-dries. We make sparkling wine. We make sparkling fruit wine. We're located in Hammonton, New Jersey, which is the blueberry capital of the world. Hammonton is known all over the world for its high bush blueberries. So we make a number of blueberry products too. We make a sparkling blueberry and a blueberry wine and a blueberry forte, and we also do hard ciders and ports. So it keeps us quite busy, and it's a little bit of the brief history of the company. There's a lot of in the beginning, I'm going back to my grandfather's days. Wine was made primarily from Native American grapes, and most of the wines on the East Coast were at that time. When I mean Native American varieties, I'm talking about grapes, names of Fredonia, Concord, Niagara, Catawba. Let's see if I can think of some more. Noah is one of them. And those varieties made both red, white, and rosés. Around early 1970s, my father started to experiment with French-American hybrids, and that opened up a big change in our portfolio, where we started growing grapes like Cheval Blanc and Vidal Blanc, and they were whites, and then reds. Some of them that are still well known: Chambourcin, Landau Noir 4511, Deschonnac, Villard Noir. And then around 1980, I started playing with vinifera, which is the European varieties. The first thing I planted was Chardonnay. And from there, we planted many varietals that are in the vinifera category, such as Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Sangiovese, Petit Verdot. We also grow Riesling, and we grow an interesting grape. It's got some ties to Ukraine, actually. It's from the Russian. It's now unfortunately under the Russians occupied. Russia is the Georgia region. There's a grape called Arcasatelli, which comes from the Georgia region, that we grow, and we've been growing that since the late 1980s, early 1990s. So we grow a lot of varieties. I think we grow somewhere around 26 different varieties of grapes, either Native Americans, French hybrids, or vinifera. So it's a mixture of red, whites, and rosés. I can't say that we're making more of any one flavor of any kind. We make a lot of different things. Somewhere around, I would say, the late 1990s, we started making fruit wines, and the first thing we made, of course, was blueberries, because we're in Hammonton. There's blueberries all over the place. Blueberries have very high antioxidants. They call them a superfruit. It's one of the cancer-fighting agents. It helps memory loss. I mean, when they finally studied blueberries around the mid-1990s, they came out with this study that said the blueberries were one of the healthiest fruits in the world. So from that, we started making blueberry wine. Only not because of that, because we live in Hammonton and we just decided to make blueberry wine. But that opened an opportunity for us because we started to send blueberry wine to Japan because the Japanese fell in love with blueberries. They never had blueberries till the 1990s. And the North American Blueberry Council introduced the Japanese to blueberries, and they loved them. So they started to send dry blueberries and fresh blueberries and frozen blueberries. And we started making blueberry wine for the Japanese, and that took off for about a good decade there for a while. And from there, we opened up and started making other fruit wines and raspberries and blackberries and pomegranate wine, and just expanded out to a bunch of fruit wines. And probably about 7-8 years ago, we decided to take it from there and start blending them with Moscato, and made it a slightly frizzante, which was a little sparkling. And we started making those products, and they started to sell all over the country. So we found diversity. I mean, we constantly are doing different things, and we're never bored. we tend to move around a lot from all different styles of wine, and we produce them all, which I think some people find interesting, because a lot of wineries either do sweet wine, or they do fruit wine, or they do grape wine, or they do dry wine. We decided our philosophy is we're just going to make everything, because we want to hit every target of the market.
Are you the outlier going from old world to fruit?
Well, I think everybody starts out making what they can make because of what they have available. It's raw material. And fruits are readily available. I mean, especially if you're doing blueberries and raspberries and blackberries and cranberries, which are all from New Jersey. But we were the other way, because we actually grew the old world grapes before we started with fruit wines, and we continue to grow these grapes. I mean, we're actually experimenting with a new variety of grapes that just came to us from Italy, which was really the brainchild of Larry Coy and Jim Carella, who managed to get this variety of grapes designed for New Jersey in Italy. And it's a new grape called San Marco. Bellevue actually has it as a varietal already. And so that's exciting, because we're actually planting something new, And there's a few other new varieties. We're always trying new things out, And honestly, as much as people don't want to hear it, it's probably a little true. But there's been a change in what we grow due to climate change. A lot of the varieties that we could not grow 25, 30 years ago, we can grow now. And there's a couple that we don't grow anymore because our weather pattern has changed in the last decade or so. So climate change plays into it to a certain degree, and what we could stand to grow in New Jersey and what we can't. So I think you're probably right. I think a lot of people started off with fruit wines, planted some of their vineyards, and planted a lot of different varieties to see what worked and what didn't. Some varieties work well in certain parts of the state, and some do not, depending on where you are. Let's take Pinot Noir for an example. That's a grape I think would do so much better in the north. A little cooler climate. Riesling does a little bit better in the north than it does down here. And I think we grow Cabernet Sauvignon a lot more successfully than they would up north. And I'm looking at New York State as well, because they also grow everything that we grow here in New York State. And there's a couple that they struggle with, and those are the ones that are very cold sensitive. And, things like Merlot and Cab Sauvignon are a little harder to grow the further you get north than, let's say, Riesling or Pinot Noir. Our biggest challenge is fungal diseases, funguses. We deal with things like powdery mildew and botrytis and downy mildew, phomopsis, somewhat black rot is still a little bit of a problem, not too much, but we have to deal with the weather, and the reason why we have these issues is we have a very humid climate, and we get a fair amount of rainfall now, which was 30, 40 years ago. We didn't have that much rainfall in comparison to today. I think we have more rain than we really need to grow grapes. It's a lot warmer now, and our summers were I think last summer was one of the warmest summers we've ever had, which for a grape farmer is not a bad thing. You like them hot and dry is kind of what we like as a farmer. If we could have it perfect, it would be hot and dry. A little bit of rain, but not too much. But every summer is different, and every growing season is different. To give you an example, we had a little frost damage last night. Full moon right after Easter. We had about 28 degrees at 4 o'clock this morning, which wasn't something we were looking forward to seeing. But some of our grapes were out. A few of the buds have broken, and we had a little bit of frost damage last night. We won't know how significant until a few more days from now. But it's the risk you take when you're a grape farmer. I mean, there's some years you're done before before spring. You lose 30-40% of the buds because of a late frost, and in some years everything's perfect. So it's the roll of the dice, as I say.
Don't forget to subscribe and like the show on iTunes, Spotify, and anywhere you listen.